This week we will be covering the second half of the fourth Perek of Rambam's Shemonah Perakim. We saw the first half last week, and just as a brief overview, what Rambam is addressing in the fourth Perek is how does a person who is spiritually ill heal himself or correct that? That is to say, a person who has an illness in his neshama, how do you fix that? How do we fix that? And the way he says it, and this is his golden rule Rambam is famous for, is the path of moderation. We don't go towards one extreme. We do not go to the other extreme. We always want to find the middle path, and that's the path we're supposed to adhere to. However, Rambam says, and this is how we ended last week, was there are some Hasidim, right, people who work lifni mishur hadin, people who do above and beyond the letter of the law. So some of them will in fact veer slightly towards one extreme, and the lesser of the extremes, right? And the reason why they do that is just to make sure that they nullify any or counteract any of the influences from their society, any improper influences, just to make sure that they stay on the right path. So the reason why they're going towards an extreme is not because the extreme is good, but just to make sure that they're counterbalancing other influences that are there. However, Rambam says, this could become a problem. Why? Because when onlookers, right, either fools or ignoramuses, however you want to translate it, see these Hasidim doing this, that is to say, veering towards one extreme, they'll think that this is good. They won't actually know what the Hasidim mean. And because they won't know, they'll actually seek to emulate them. And by seeking to emulate them, they'll actually start afflicting their bodies, thinking that it's good, and in this way they'll come close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. However, that is not that's not the proper way, because Rambam says, "Ke'ilu Hashem soneh haguf v'rotzeh la'avto," as if God hates the body and seeks its destruction. V'hem lo yadu she'ela peulot ra'ot v'shebehen yageh pchitut mepchitut hanefesh. This is a categorically not good thing to do, and the only reason why they're doing this is because they don't understand the kavanah, right, the intention of this Chasidim. And a person who does this, it's like a person who just doesn't understand how medicine works. That is to say, a person could go to the emergency room, right, and see a patient being treated, and be like, wow, if this patient is being treated with this, and in fact he'll get better, then maybe me as a healthy person, I could take those things, and I'll either maintain my health, or I'll become healthier. Rambam says that's incorrect. The person who approaches life that way, or medicine that way, or spirituality that way, will actually, instead of becoming healthier, will in fact really become ill. A person could be healthy, but by doing these things, he might actually make himself sick. And therefore, Rambam says this is to be avoided. Do not do this. And moreover, this isn't a unique idea by Rambam. This is articulated again in the Mesilat Yesharim. In the Ramchal's work, in his Akdama, right, in the very introduction, he actually quotes this. He says, he's talking about how people don't know what real Chassidut looks like. Real, like, acting like a mensch, really being the kind of person who acts above and beyond the letter of the law. So he says, most people will think that Chassidut, what it's all about, it's about saying all these psalms and all these long confessions, so much kashim, right, fasting all the time, hard fasts, and dunking yourself into freezing cold water. Right? The intellect doesn't make sense to us. And emotionally the way we react is, we just can't, it doesn't sit well. But real Chassidut, right, like the beautiful kind, the one that really appeals to us and that makes sense to us, we don't really know what it looks like. We can't even imagine it because we don't see. And so the Ramchal is again re-emphasizing this point of Rambam, that it's very important to have a proper orientation to what real Chassidut looks like. Rather, says Rambam, the Torah wants moderation. That is to say, right, a person, the Torah wants us to go through the middle road, the middle path, the path of moderation, not to veer towards any extremes. Right? A person should eat and enjoy in moderation. A person should drink in moderation. All things in moderation. And moreover, he says a person should dwell in a country, right? You can live in society, right? As long as you do so with uprightness, right? You act honestly and you follow the laws of the Torah faithfully. A person do all these things, but a person doesn't need to start putting on all these uncomfortable clothes. He doesn't need to go to the harim v'bamidbarot, right? He doesn't need to go to the desert or into these mountains. He doesn't need to afflict his body. All that stuff is unnecessary. It is not a true spiritual path. And Rambam quotes the mitzvah of Nazir. A Nazir is and this is brought by Chazal. A Nazir is a person who refrains from wine, who does not cut his hair and avoids the dead. And at the end of his Nazirut, he has to bring a chatat. That's a really serious korban, the kind of korban you bring if you inadvertently violate Shabbat, or if you eat food on Yom Kippur, or if you eat chametz on Pesach, right? Some serious transgressions. And a person brings a chatat for that. And a Nazir is bringing a chatat for his Nazirut. Why? Chazal says, because he abstained from wine. He didn't enjoy wine. So Rambam makes a kal v'chomer, like a strong argument. If that's true for a Nazir who's doing a davar shebekadusha, he's not even enjoying wine. Wine is a luxury. All the more so if we refrain from enjoying, not a good thing. And here it's important to kind of take a step back and be like, okay, so what does the path of moderation look like? It's very nice to say, but how do we define that? And in order to understand it, I think there is a central Mishnah in Pirkei Avot. This is in the 6th Perek. Rambam does not have a commentary on this, and the reason why not is because the 6th Perek of Pirkei Avot is actually not formally a part of the Talmudic tractate of Avot. It is a compilation of braitas that speak about the praiseworthiness of Torah learning. It was added as the 6th Perek for practical reasons, just because there are 6 Shabbats between Pesach and Shavuot, and people traditionally learn Pirkei Avot on the Shabbats between Pesach and Shavuot, and therefore we needed a 6th, so we brought this in, and also it talks about the praiseworthiness of Torah learning, so that seems to be a fitting message for Shavuot. Here's what the Mishnah says. Perek 6, Mishnah Daled, the 4th Mishnah. Kachi darka shel Torah. This is the path of Torah, the way of Torah. Pat v'melech tochal, eat bread with salt, umayim b'meshura tishte, and you should drink water in measure. V'al haaretz tishan, sleep on the earth, on the ground. V'chayitzar tichya, and live a life of deprivation. Uva Torah at amel, and you shall be amel in Torah, you shall toil in Torah. Now that seems to be not living in moderation at all. How are we to understand this? How is Rambam to understand this? How does he explain what's going on? And so, in fact, I think a strong orientation in this, I want to quote 2 sources. One is Rav Aharon Lichtenstein, who is the Rosh Yeshiva of Har Etzion. He was the son-in-law of Rav Soloveitchik. Rav Soloveitchik was also his Rebbe, or one of his Rebbeim, certainly one of his principal Rebbeim. He's effectively in like a centrist orthodoxy, modern orthodoxy, right? He labels it centrist orthodoxy just to use his own words. Here's what he says, and he, I'm pretty sure, gave this in the 1980s. So here's what he says. In recent years, one observes on the American scene a terribly disturbing phenomenon, the spread of hedonistic values, but with a kind of glatt kosher packaging. Just skipping along. So in the last decade or two, a whole culture has developed geared towards frum Jews, where the message is enjoy, 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 and everything has a hechsher and a super hechsher. The message is that whatever the Gentiles have, we have too. They have trips to the Virgin Islands, we have trips to the Virgin Islands. Consequently, there has been a certain debasement of values, in which people have a concern for the minutia of halacha, which of course one should be concerned about, but with a complete lack of awareness of the extent to which the underlying message is so totally non-halachic and anti-halachic. And he finally concludes with this specific inyan. To some extent, this feeling has permeated our world. A whole culture of enjoyment has begun to take hold. This is something which is recent, and with which anyone who is a ben Torah certainly should in no way identify or associate. That whole culture advocates that man is born for pleasure, but unfortunately has to work if he wants to enjoy. In contrast, we have to know that Adam le'amal yulad, man is born to do labor. And he's quoting Eov 5:7. So he seems to be particularly articulating against this excessive enjoyment. But again, that's like, okay, well, that seems to be too much. So what does Amelu look like? Does that mean just working to get a great salary, making a lot of money? Well, let's see what he says later on. When he's speaking about the relationship between working people and learners, so what does he say? So unfortunately, balabatim, working people, very often have the notion that they are the ones who work, while those in the Beit Midrash are batlanim, idlers. A person who knows what learning is all about knows that Torah is the real amal. And he really seems to be quoted, like citing towards this Mishnah, right? What does it say? Pat b'melech tochal, eat bread with salt, umayim b'meshura tishte, and drink wine with leisure. Why? Uva Torah ta'amel, and toil in Torah. So here, like, we need to understand moderation is clearly not like, okay, well, instead of having 4 cakes, I'll have only 2. Okay, well, how much do you really need? And the idea isn't to promulgate enjoyment and to encourage as much enjoyment as possible. within limits, within a range. There's a certain perspective a person is supposed to have, and I think a good way of orienting ourselves to the full extent of what is meant here by Rav Lichtenstein, it's important to look at what Rabbi Tatz says in Letters to a Buddhist Jew. Now, Rabbi Tatz is a Talmud of Rav Moshe Shapira. Speaks for itself. Here's what he says, page 166. Attachment to materialism is antithetical to Torah. It is not wealth as such that is the problem. It is the attachment to wealth that obstructs. Poverty in the literal economic sense is not essential to Torah. Detachment from the material is. The Mishnah states, this is the way of Torah, eat bread with salt, drink water by measure, and sleep on the earth. The commentaries explain that this Mishnah is not teaching that a diet of bread and water is mandatory for progress in Torah. Richer food is allowed. Rather, the teaching here is that bread and water should be enough. One may eat a meager diet or a richer diet. The point is that it should make no difference. When the excess becomes important, when it cannot be instantly exchanged for utter simplicity and exchanged with total equanimity, then one is far from the way of Torah. I think that really explains what's going on here. What's moderation? Moderation is the idea that a person can enjoy, but the enjoyment shouldn't be, you're not enjoying because like this is super important to me and I couldn't give this up at a moment's notice. It's that I'm enjoying because like I'm able to do so. However, if posed between two things, the point is it's all about perspective. What's a person's vision from this? And by the way, what Rabbi Tatz is saying is actually clearly based on Arashi. If we're to look again at that Mishnah, let me see if I could quickly pull it up. So here we go. What does Rashi say? So Patpa Melech Tochal. It's not telling that the wealthy person to go live a life of tsar, of difficulty and like of pain and tribulations. That's not what it's saying. Ela hachikamar. Afilu ein la'adam ela patpa melach. Right? Even if a person doesn't have, he only has bread with salt. Ve'en lo kar v'chesed lishon ela la'aretz al yimanu milasok ba. Right? The point is, it should make no difference. It doesn't make a difference. That is the point that we're trying to see here. That is a critical element of what's happening. Now, we'll have to end here and we'll pick up next week.